The Future History of Energy and Transportation. Documenting the paradigm shift from the era of oil and internal combustion to the era of robotics. By Julian Cox. Narrated by the author with the aid of an artificial intelligence. Chapter 18. Of emissions. EV manufacturers and gasoline vehicle manufacturers can charge their customers exactly the same for emissions, zero. Conflating emissions with efficiency has contributed to endless confusion and futility in public debate. Emissions relativism doesn't work. In the 1990s, Japan stormed the US and European vehicle markets with comparatively low emissions vehicles and never stopped storming since then. Result: Toyota became the first or second largest global polluter in terms of passenger vehicle emissions, not per vehicle, but in aggregate. In more recent years, Toyota has expended vast sums of money lobbying against electrification of transport, in particular by seeking to seriously undermine cogent public policy with hydrogen, something that fails every single test of efficiency described herein, beyond the component level. Hydrogen is not as a potential solution to global emissions but more likely its most critical and under-acknowledged anthropogenic threat, absent a radical course correction. A more complete discussion of hydrogen is provided in the chapter entitled Of Hydrogen and Earth. Speaking of emissions, 34 gigatons of fallout annually related to energy and transportation alone, plus additional gigatons from slash and burn deforestation, is deeply unpleasant even if it isn't radioactive. The World Health Organization estimates 3 million lives lost annually are attributable to it and that 1% of the world's population breathes acceptably clean air. Labor hours lost to recoverable respiratory illness and the cost of healthcare is another linked statistic. While it is objectively true to say that on average those lives would likely not have been as healthy, as prosperous or as long in the era before fossil fuels, at the time of writing, that is no longer a viable excuse. We are not facing a dilemma of fossil fuels versus a return to streets packed with horse manure and horse carcasses. The choice is between internal combustion and the embrace of cleaner, more powerful and more economical tools to displace wasteful and relatively uneconomical polluting practices. Hydrocarbon emissions, exhaust emissions and wellhead emissions of all kinds are seriously horrible. Dumping sulfur compounds into the atmosphere from coal and from bunker oil used across the world's shipping lanes is most likely the root cause of massive deforestation due to acid rain and a primary contributor to asthma and of ocean acidification that threatens the root ecosystem of global fisheries, exacerbating the effects of toxic liquid spills into river basins on land. Mercury emissions from gas wellheads and the processes that convert produced natural gas to pipeline natural gas, from oil refineries and from coal combustion, concentrates in food chains of all kinds prior to serving food to humans. The 97.2 metric tons of CO2e emissions produced by a single BMW 328i over 300,000 miles at 27 miles per gallon is net of the mass of the steam content in gasoline and exhaust, proportionately 31.5 metric tons per 300,000 miles, that functions to bind particulates, sulfur and nitrogen compounds, the occasional mercury and radioactive molecule and unburnt hydrocarbons laced with the lubricants of two-stroke engines into a toxic, bioavailable, radiomimetic, nanoparticulate smog that is just perfect for lodging in the alveoli of human lungs and triggering lung disease. Unsurprisingly, people in many cities opt to wear face masks to repel smog, including in those cities not directly affected by local coal utilities. Over the years, vehicle exhaust has definitely shortened the lives of millions, not counting any of the wars and industrial accidents related to its attainment, nor those lives cut short due to toxicity resulting from onshore and offshore oil spills, entering the food chain, and groundwater toxicity entering drinking water supplies. For decades, up until the year 2000, in the Western world tetraethyl lead was mixed with gasoline just to get engines to run a bit smoother. In some lawless places, sales of gasoline laced with this material still occur. Anyone remember 4-star gasoline or why we call gasoline unleaded? Like who has to advertise that a consumer product does not have a toxic heavy metal deliberately added to it for use as an aerosol designed to be vented around young women and children on the school run. This is the kind of thing that adds a moral dimension, quite besides the fact that we and the food species we depend upon for survival now live in an atmosphere of unprecedented chemical composition. Almost no species alive today has evolutionary experience of a 415 parts per million CO2 atmosphere. We will be the first life like us to find out what happens next. Willful pollution and risk-taking of this nature in any part of the economy is rationally indefensible in the presence of any economically competitive alternative and morally indefensible to promote or defend thereafter. In some cases the situation is just absurd. By way of example, the Beijing license lottery, and in Mexico City where cars are licensed to drive on certain days of the week and not others, because sulfurous vehicle exhaust hits you like a baseball bat upon disembarking a plane in either location, and it's just not all that funny anymore. The truth is, a warm and windless day in downtown LA, Paris, London, New York, Washington, D.C., Seoul, Munich, New Delhi, Stockholm, Melbourne, Johannesburg, Cairo, Geneva, etc. is not very much better. There are economically viable alternatives as well as an emergent political will in the USA, the military economic spider at the center of the oil era web, to disengage from OPEC and from debt dependency as the central pillar of the U.S. economy, and to turn over the future to the innovator and the customer, the voter, as the U.S. Constitution intended. This is the main chance to be embraced, and it is quite important for those protesting against it in the name of the environment to understand this. Protesting U.S. energy independence and localization of manufacturing, see Tesla Gigafactory, Nevada, USA, for a perfect match with this description, is a serious miscalculation. Because this is the correct thread to pull in order to unravel the entire sweater. It is the localization of energy that puts production in range of fair and ordinary price competition from renewables, that are in fact cheaper and getting cheaper still, and localization of manufacturing that places industry practices within the jurisdiction of customers and voters. This combination addresses container ships and oil tankers. The Keystone XL oil pipeline has bad optics because the goings-on in the Middle East, and the oil tankers unloading at the offshore terminal in Louisiana, and the 20,000 kilometers of oil tanker lanes in between, that the Keystone XL stands to displace, to meet the same U.S. demand, is not weighed in the balance because these activities are comparatively invisible. Update: the Keystone XL pipeline has been suspended if not cancelled, and the U.S. government is beseeching OPEC and Russia to increase production and shipping of oil imports to the United States. A classic example of how environmental protest movements are exploited to increase global emissions. If oil is your enemy of choice, you definitely want to keep your renewable friends close and this enemy closer. Oil is not bad, you can make wind turbine blades with it. Burning it is bad. Oil, gas, coal and internal combustion has had a very good run of the table. Time to hit bank and leave with the winnings, ideally with all creditors settled and shareholders presented with their final dividend check, with thanks. It won't happen that way, but it really should, and if there are any lawmakers that are not in the pockets of this industry and more importantly, its financiers, then this would be the calling, the protection of creditors and managing the disciplined exit of shareholders that wish to reinvest in the future. This, rather than waiting for World War II-era industries to hit the wall running. Presenting the independent shareholders of these industries with capital gains tax relief on divestment would be a very good idea and release a whole lot of stagnant capital to reinvest in growth industry of a desirable nature. There is little to no point in treating companies like Exxon, Chevron, Ford and General Motors as an investment vehicle for renewable energy and transportation technologies. Just about any company is better off starting afresh without the headache of disposing of outdated plant, machinery, culture and obligations to a technology and business model that customers no longer require. Orderly and rapid divestment, back to back with renewable infrastructure and sustainable transport investment, not by tax and spend, but in pursuit of opportunity, without an economic collapse in between, this and anticipating and addressing skills gaps that will emerge, with training and education as the highest possible policy goal and the role of good governance here. The horse is actually one of the most energy-efficient carbon-neutral transport devices ever discovered. The horse was not sidelined on account of energy efficiency. It was sidelined from the global economy on account of excessive human labor inputs, combined to a secondary degree with passenger safety and distaste for its emissions. Yes, life, and life expectancy, is better with mine and burn despite all of its drawbacks than was the case with only horses and steam engines to amplify human productivity, but it is nowhere near as good as is now possible, and economically inevitable. Once more unto the breach.